Good morning. I'm Ruby Payne, and we're going to look at bridges out of poverty communities and how you begin to use it as an economic development tool. We have 330 communities around the world using it, and we have had almost 70,000 adults in poverty do the Getting Ahead book. It's worked on this book, based on this book, Getting Ahead, and it's based upon Bridges Out of Poverty. These two books come from my original work, which was a framework for understanding poverty that I wrote for educators, and we are now using and adapted it for communities. So what is it? It is not a social justice approach. We do not look at class from a social justice perspective. We look at it from two research bases. One, situated learning by Lave and Winger, how your environment shapes thinking, and then Bandura's work on efficacy. So it is a social cognitive approach, how environments shape thinking. And in this approach, we look at poverty as a continuum, a larger complex frame. One of the things that derails communities is they get in an argument about what causes class, and they start fighting about causation and never deal with the issue. There are four distinct, well-researched bases on what causes class, and they have been politicized. The first research base is that class is caused by the choices of the individual. Second one is the resources of the community, which is housing, jobs, transportation. Third one is exploitation, racism, sexism, predators. And the fourth one is systems, economic and government systems. Well, if you are on the political right, what you will do is you'll think it's about the first two research bases. If you're on the political left, you tend to think it's about the last two. And what we find when we go in communities, they want to fight about causation, whose fault it is. Well, the reality is all four of these research bases contribute. And if you look at Pinkety's work, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics, he cites the educational attainment levels and the family structure, the support systems. Now, it gets further complicated then because it gets politicized and people fight. So we say if you truly want to address it in your community, then you have to look at all four causes. And it is complicated by the fact that we now have changed our economic system. When we were primarily agrarian, we measured wealth on paper by land, cattle, and deeds, okay? And mostly deeds. That's how you capitalized on your wealth. When we became industrial, we took that same concept across, except we called them stock certificates, okay? And now, in a knowledge-based economy, no one is really quite sure how you measure intellectual capital. Talent, expertise, the closest we have to it is whether or not you have a college degree. But everybody knows you can work with people all day long who have a college degree and they don't have any intellectual capital. So it's not a given. So what we have done is we have defined poverty and wealth as the extent to which you do without resources. And we've identified 9 resources. Any one of these resources, not having them, can destabilize your reality. And the more unstable your reality, the more it tends to change your thinking. For example, a lot of people think poverty is just about money, but it's not. It's not nearly the only thing that can destabilize your reality. Like, for example, physical illness. 75% of personal bankruptcies are related to a health issue. So one of the things we do is we look at it from the micro and the macro level. First at the individual level and the larger community level. So at the individual level, one of the things we know is this, that there is a continuum of resources, okay? And we're going to say that there's this marriage that occurs between who and what you know, what your resources are, and what your environment requires from you to survive. Many people underestimate the impact of environments. For example, I was reading an article about a midwife in Africa, and a foundation came to her and said, what would make the biggest difference for you? What could we do for you that would make a big difference? And she said, I'd like to have a flashlight. And they said, a flashlight? She said, yes. Many times I get called out in the middle of the night and I have to walk in areas where there is no light. And she said, there are poisonous snakes on the road. And if I just had a flashlight, my life would be so much easier. So we look at how your resources, who and what you know, how you spend your time, and what your environment requires from you to survive, how that then shapes your thinking, and how you use that then to negotiate environments. And one of the things we know is this: the fewer resources you have, the more you live over here. The more resources you have, the more you live over here. And we're going to define middle class basically when your resource base is stable. You know where you're going to sleep at night, you know you got food every day, you're right here, okay? The thinner your resources, the more you get over here. The more your thoughts become polarity, either or. And one of the things we know then, based upon this thinking, you negotiate your reality. And how you spend your time determines what you know. Everybody in the world has 24 hours a day. I've spoken all over the world. It really doesn't matter where you are. You got 24 hours a day. And how you spend that time makes a huge difference in what you know and who you know. One of the things we do for adults in poverty, we ask them, we say, you are a problem solver. You have to be. So tell us how you spend your time. And this is a compilation in front of you about how 300 adults in poverty say they spend their time. And if you look at this, what you see on this chart, you yourself would not spend time on. A lot of people say agency time. When you go to agencies for help, like welfare, like housing subsidies, food bank, okay? And other people say criminal justice system. Well, what we know is the thinner your resources, the more it focuses your time, and the more you have to spend time looking for resources. Now, if your resource base is more stable, then you tend to spend your time this way. So what do you see on this chart that you did not see on the first chart? Well, people say things like vacation, civic clubs, hobbies, entertainment. Well, almost all three groups spend money and time on entertainment, okay? The last one is wealth. And wealth we're going to define as the top 1% of households in the United States, which in the research is 7.8 million more or net worth, okay? And this is what they say they spend their time on. Now, what do you see on this chart you did not see on the first one or the second one? The point is, one circle is not better than another. They're just different. But they all are in your state. They are all in your community. And they're making rules and negotiating environments based upon their understandings of how the world works. If you're in a state, I can ask you point blank, which circle is making the laws for the state? Okay? It's this one. Which circle is running the institutions? It's this one. And which circle do the majority of your clients come from? It's this one. They don't understand each other. The hidden rules are all different. Hidden rules are unspoken cueing mechanisms people use to let you know you do or don't belong. They show up in the workplace. They show up in school. You know, your grandma had hidden rules about how to be in her house. Your mother did. Everybody's got hidden rules. You have them by race, religion, region of the country. Well, we have my class too. And where it shows up in communities is time and money. See, one of the things that happens around the world, and I don't really care where you are, okay? If you're kind of want to keep stable resources, if you want to be in that middle class world, then what you do is you make your decisions every day against three things: work, achievement, and material security. What you do is you work, you go to work, that's what you do with your time. If you can afford to be educated, you do that, okay? And you buy things that become an asset, like land or a mortgage, something you can rely on, and you have rules about money. Number one, I don't ask you for money, and you don't ask me. Number two, if you borrow, you have to pay it back. Number three, you never ever quit a job until you have another one. And number four, you don't tell people your salary. But If you're in wealth, you have a different problem, because your problem is this time is you have more resources than you can take care of by yourself. So you have to hire people to help you. It makes you vulnerable at a personal safety level. There is such reverse snobbery in middle class about wealth, because middle class doesn't understand what a huge issue personal safety is, okay? So in wealth, you make your decisions against your financial, your social, and your political connections, okay? And that leads to a hidden rule. When you go to a party among the very truly wealthy, that top 1%, you don't introduce yourself. If you wait till you are introduced. And when they introduce you, they say your name and your connection, because that is an indication of the kind of connections you have. And you make your decisions against your connections because they keep you safe and they help you make more money. And the rule about money and wealth is you don't talk about the cost of an item. But if you're in poverty, you have a different problem again. Your problem this time in poverty is that you don't have material security. So you make your decisions against relationships, entertainment, and survival, because that's what you're doing. My brother in Ohio lost his farm in the 1980s. He bounced around with employment for 3 years. During that time, he and his wife had a severely handicapped child. The child is 25 and can't feed himself, so his wife stayed at home to take care of the child, i.e. knocked a wage earner out. And then my brother got sick, but he didn't go to the doctor. And then when he finally did, he had a degenerative illness, then he got cancer, then he died. So I paid for where he lived. I gave him money each month. My sister gave money. My brother paid the utilities. The sister paid the gasoline. We bought him a vehicle. He didn't make his decisions against work and achievement and material security. He did it against relationships, survival, and entertainment. And what's the rule about money and poverty? If I have any and you ask me for some, we got to share. Work is not reliable. People are, more so. So this thinking then permeates communities. And what we know is this, is that Paul Sappho, Institute for the Human Future in California, he said that it's going to be possible in the future for communities to become feral or thriving. Feral means they were domesticated and went back to the wild. And one of the things we find is that he says it takes 20 to 25 years to become an overnight success. And there's this radar in communities that happens, that things happen under the radar that nobody sees. And one of the things is the multiplier of poverty. People go, oh, we don't have any. And then it gets to be 40% and they're like, ooh, they came overnight. No, they didn't. They just got above the radar. And there is a multiplier in demographics. And it has to do with how you have children when you're not educated. Now, this is not about race. It's about education and the multiplier effect. It is not about human growth. It is about the multiplier that happens when you have or do not have education. And in America, we know that there's a tipping point that occurs. And let me show you what this multiplier looks like. In America right now, you have your first child, if you got a college degree, on the average at 30 years, and you have 1.1 children. Now, it's up to, I think, about 1.4 children now, okay? And what you have is, in 90 years, that's 3 generations, or almost 4 children. Because the generational repeat pattern is 30 years. If you do not have a GED and you do not have a high school diploma, you have your first child in your teens, and you have, on the average, 2.5 children. That's 5 generations in 90 years. It's a multiplier. It's 48.6 children. And what you find is that right now in America, only 9 out of every 100 children who grow up in poverty get a college degree. Now, it's a multiplier. So one of the things in communities now, when we go to work with communities, they go, what do we have to do about it? Well, you have to create an infrastructure. Eisenhower, after World War II, realized that if America was going to have a strong economy, we needed to have the interstate highway system. because he realized that the only reason the Allies beat the Nazis is the Allies had better supply chains. So he came back to the United States and built the highway interstate system, Pennsylvania Turnpike. That was an infrastructure for an industrial community. We do not have, in most communities in America right now, an infrastructure to build intellectual capital for individuals over the age of 18 who did not get a K-12 or who do not have the money to go back to school. We put them in prison, we put them on welfare, disability, but we don't have capacity to build that infrastructure. So one of the things we're looking at is how you do it through Bridges communities. And we have this graphic that you can read more about on our website, okay, about how you do that. We do it at the individual, the institutional, and the community level. But Stanford University says this: if you want what you do in your community to work, and then you have to have two-pronged approaches. Said most communities either want to go technical, like housing, job development, or they want to do a relational one. He said if you only do the technical one, the change lasts as long as the money is there, and then it goes away. Freddie Gray's neighborhood in Baltimore, that neighborhood spent $130 million in a 9-year period between, I think it was 97, 98, and 2004, 2005. Housing, job skill development, transportation, etc. As soon as that money was gone, the neighborhood went back to the way it was before. So we are interested in how you do both. And here's the kind of ROI that we're getting now. We haven't done it long enough to have ROI. There's a community in Oklahoma. They've taken 10 families, 34 individuals out of poverty. And they have calculated that it is an annual return to the community of over $2 million. Now to take 10 families and 34 people out of poverty costs about $75,000, okay? So for $75,000 to get a $2 million return is remarkable. So as your community thinks about this and what to do, one of the things we're going to encourage you to do is give us a call, okay? If you're interested in this, we're interested in helping you think about your community and how you begin to do economic development in a way that is inclusive, makes sense, and helps your community thrive and not be feral.